I would like to thank one of my subscribers, JG, for sending this article from BBC News, November 9th, 2018. Remarkable decline in fertility rates. And this is global. So there's definitely a global decline. The nations that seems to be the hardest hit are the ones that claim they are advanced and developed. Claim, right? There has been a remarkable global decline in the number of children women are having, researchers say. The report found fertility rates falls meant nearly half of countries were now facing a baby bust, meaning there are insufficient children to maintain their population size. The researchers said, and these findings were a huge surprise. And there would be profound consequences for societies with more grandparents than grandchildren. How big has the fall been? The study published in The Lancet followed trends in every country from 1950 to 2017. In 1950, women were having an average of 4.7 children in their lifetime. The fertility rate all but halved to 2.4 per woman by last year. But that masked huge variations between nations. The fertility rate in Niger, West Africa, is 7.1, but in the Mediterranean islands of Cyprus, women are having one child on average. How does the fertility rate have to be? How high does the fertility rate have to be? Whenever a country's average fertility rate drops below approximate, so 2.1 is what they're saying in order to maintain a population. And I have seen this in multiple articles. But you have many of these nations that are well below that. So now this is being described as what they call a baby bust. And some of these countries, on top of having a low birth rate, they have high rates of death in childhood. At the start of the study in 1950, there were 0 nations in this position. So there were no nations on the entire globe that was going through a population decline in the 1950s. But see, ladies and gentlemen, that all changed by the end of the 50s. See, World War II and the baby boom that was going on after the war when the soldiers came home, that went on all the way through the early 50s. But it started fizzling out by the late 50s. And that's when the decline actually started. It started here in America around that time. Okay, so women over 34 are being refused IVF treatments. Okay, so just some more, I guess, additional articles there. Professor Christopher Murray, the director of the Institute for Health Metrics and Evaluation at the University of Washington, told BBC, "We've reached this watershed where half of countries have fertility rates below the replacement level. So, if nothing happens, the populations will decline in those countries. It's a remarkable transition. It's a surprise even to people like myself. The idea that it's half the countries in the world will be a huge surprise to people. Which countries are affected? More economically developed countries include Europe, the US, South Korea, and Australia have lower fertility rates. And these are countries, ladies and gentlemen, all of them are countries that put money and careers ahead of family. Look at the ideology of each one of these countries, and you'll see article after article talking about women and their careers and women moving up the ladder and incomes from women increasing, because these nations where you see the population decline, that's what they value the most. I just want you to notice that pattern. It does not mean the number of people living in these countries are falling, at least not yet, as the size of a population is a mix of the fertility rate, death rate, and migration. It can also take a generation for changes in fertility rate to take hold, which is not going to happen. Even your scientists will tell you, once your population falls below a certain point, there's no coming back from that. You can't come back from that when you have your baby boomers as your largest population in America among certain groups. And all of the other generations past the baby boomers are much smaller. How are a group that's much smaller going to repopulate at the size of the baby boomers? They can't do it. They can't. Okay, they can't. This is why they're all getting all kinds of fertility treatments now. But Professor Murray said we will soon be transitioning to a point where societies are grappling with a declining population, and it's going to impact everything. I was looking at an article, which I might do later on, where pensions are now being impacted by the low birth rate. So it's impacting everything. Half of the world's nations are still producing enough children to grow, but as more countries advance economically, more will have lower fertility rates. So there you go. The more advanced a country claim they are, like the US, the less likely they're going to bounce back from this stuff. Again, they value careers, money ahead of families. And you're going to see this pattern with every single country with a decline. Why is the fertility rate falling? The fall in fertility rate is not down to sperm counts or any of the things that normally come to mind when thinking of fertility, and that's where they're false. It's a lot of infertility going on this planet right now, and there's a lot of people spending top dollar to try to get treated for their infertility. So I don't agree with what they just said. Instead of being put down to three key factors: fewer deaths in childhood means women have fewer babies, greater access to contraceptive, more women in education and work. And I agree with the third one more than the other ones. I mean, women were on contraceptives in this country for a long time, and they kept right on reproducing. So I don't think that's as big a factor as they're claiming. What will the impact be? Without migration, countries will face aging and shrinking populations. They're already facing that. Dr. George Leeson, director of the Oxford Institute of Population Aging, says that does not have to be a bad thing as long as the whole society adjusts to the massive demographic change, but they're not adjusting to it. You look, you got China, who had a lot of people. Now, just like America, their biggest population in China are their elderly. All of the populations after that, there's fewer women and tons of men, and those populations are much smaller than the elder population that's there. So they're really in the same boat that America's in. He told the BBC demographic impact on every single aspect of our lives. Just look, just look out of your window at the people on the streets, the houses, the traffic, the consumption. It is all driven. Yeah, the demographics. Yeah, because I can tell you, even here in New Jersey, there's a lot of, when I go out in public, most of the white people I see, the majority are elderly, up in age. And you see the younger population. And again, when I'm out, I still see the main ones pushing strollers are Black women, Hispanics, and Asians. The white women, you see far few of the white women out here in public pushing strollers. A lot of times when I see them, they tend to have older children, teenagers, preteens. I don't even see a lot of them walking around with toddlers anymore, like I do the other women when I walk into a store. Everything we plan for is not just driven by the numbers in the population, but also the age structure, and that is changing. So fundamentally, we haven't got our heads around it. So, in other words, ladies and gentlemen, he knows this is happening. And no matter how much he's trying to sugarcoat it, it can't be sugarcoated. Okay, if you are not reproducing, your future is bleak. All right. And again, we are looking at a natural extinction occur on the earth. And it seems to me the more recessive you are, the more you are dying out on the planet. I sure see the pattern, and I know I'm not the only one to see it. Think of all of the profound social and economic consequences of a society structured like that, with more grandparents than grandchildren. I think Japan is very aware of this. They're facing declining populations, but I don't think it's hit many countries in the West because low fertility has been compensated with migration. Not entirely. Not entirely. Not entirely. I mean, look, even with all of the people coming in here from South America, just know, ladies and gentlemen, there's also a population decline in South America. Okay? So these people may be migrating here, but they're coming from places that also struggle with low birth rate. So I don't know how that's an answer. But at a global level, there is no migration solution. And I agree with that. Migration can only take you so far. It's not going to entirely replace the populations that you're losing. No, I'm sorry. I think that's unrealistic for anybody to believe that. But while the change may challenge societies, it may also have environmental benefits given the impact of our species. What about China? China has seen huge population growths since 1950, going from around a half a billion inhabitants to 1.4 billion. To be honest with you, they're really not that much greater than Africa. You know, some people talk like there's huge differences. Actually, there really is not that big of a difference in their population size. But see, Africa is way better off because China destroyed themselves by aborting a majority female babies, where you don't have that imbalance in Africa. So Africa is way better off. But it too is facing the challenge of fertility rates, which stood at only 1.5 in 2017. And remember, anything below a 2.1, you will not be able to replace all of the people that are dying out. So China is at a 1.5. They will never be able to replace the elderly population that's dying out. Not at a 1.5. And has recently moved away from its famous one-child policy, that they practiced for 40 years. They can't bounce back from that. China is screwed. China is seriously screwed. The reason developed countries need a fertility rate of 2.1 is because not all children survive to adulthood, and babies are ever so slightly more likely to be male than female. Yeah, in China. That's because they're still aborting girls. Now, listen to this. But in China, the report shows for every 100 girls born, there are 117 boys, which implies very sustainable sex selective abortion, which is still going on, and even the possibility of female infanticide. Well, I guess that's what you want to call it. But China, ladies and gentlemen, has the worst abortion rate on the face of the earth. They have aborted so many female babies, it's not even funny. And they said they're still secretly doing it. They're not supposed to do ultrasounds to find out the baby's sex like they could years ago. They stopped doing that, but they said they're going secretly to places that will do that for them, or they're going underground to find out the baby's gender and then getting abortions. They say you can get abortions all over the place in China. There's so many abortion, and many of them are people are doing abortions and they're really not licensed to do abortions, but they do them anyway. You know how people always secretly did abortions. Even in this country, those things occurred. But they're saying a lot of people are going to get these ultrasounds done, and they are getting their babies aborted. If they're girls, that's still going on. So you're going to always have an imbalance, not only in the generations that you're looking at now, but even the generations behind are still imbalanced with more boys than girls. And they said you can see it in the schools. When you go to the schools around China, they said it might be some of the schools are practically all boys in the school. Or you'll see a handful of girls in the school and everybody else is a boy. They say you can go to the schools and literally see the imbalance in the schools around China. They can't bounce back from this, y'all. They messed themselves up by practicing that one child rule. That's when they went wrong. Whoever was running China, they really messed y'all up. And that was a political choice for them to have one child in China. And you can clearly tell this is something they will never come back from now. They're never coming back from that. And a birth rate at 1.5 now, even if they had 2 children, think about this, even if they had 2 and 3 children, it's still not going to make up for all of the generations. You're talking about 4 generations, right, that have the imbalance. They're not going to be able to catch that up. It's a damn shame. These people claim to be smart, which I know they're not because I used to watch them cheat in college, and claim to be advanced, but they didn't have sense enough to know that what they were doing was going to mess up the population and birth rate in China. Nobody had that amount of intelligence to see this. Wow. I don't think you're developed nations. I think all of these folks that are labeling their countries as developed and advanced, you're primitive. Okay, if you are struggling with a birth rate and you are in what is classified as a developed nation, you are actually primitive. But please tell me what you think, ladies and gentlemen. You know, the Asians and the Caucasians are the most recessive people on the planet, and they are the most heavily impacted by the infertility rate. And they are the ones that have the biggest declining populations on the face of the earth. I think there's something to that. But tell me what you think, ladies and gentlemen. Please leave your comment and subscribe. Don't forget to hit on the notification bell, and I will see you on the next video. Peace, family.